Tonight, treading towards trade deals. After Vice President J.D. Vance suggested progress for the UK, the White House says the first deals are due soon.
There have been many talks with countries. We've had more than 15 deals, pieces of paper put on the table, proposals that are actively being considered.
As Sudan marks 2 years of civil war, the Foreign Secretary pledges £120 million from a depleted aid budget. We'll look at how our Africa correspondent, Yusrael Bagir, has reported on her home country being consumed by conflict.
This place is full of memories, not just for me, but for everyone I know. It is the most iconic marketplace in the capital, if not the country. And it used to just be bustling, full of life.
I'll speak to the head of mission at Sudan's embassy in London. Also ahead, a Russian court convicts 4 journalists of extremism for working for the late Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. Plus, why the president who promised a new Zimbabwe is being accused of planning to stay in power beyond his limit. And the reluctant community leader. I talked to trans actress Mulvaney about how a big fall led to higher fame. That's all coming up in The World with me, Barbara Serra. Good evening. The White House has tonight given new hints about the countries inching closer to U.S. trade deals, saying the first agreements are due very soon. It follows the Vice President, J.D. Vance, talking up the chances of the U.K. striking a deal. Here's some of what White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt had to say.
Obviously, as you've heard from numerous administration officials, there have been many talks with countries. We've had more than 15 deals, pieces of paper put on the table, proposals that are actively being considered. And as we've said consistently, more than 75 countries have reached out. So there's a lot of work to do. We very much understand that, but we do believe that we can announce some deals very soon.
And our U.S. correspondent Mark Stone is in Washington. I mean, obviously, the UK has been trying to strike a deal with the U.S. for quite some time. What else do we know about these possible deals in the pipeline?
Well, I don't think we should confuse trade deals and an economic deal. There is a difference. I mean, the UK has been trying to get a trade deal with the United States ever since Brexit. Now, what they are expecting they're hoping they might get with the United States in the days and weeks ahead is not a full-blown trade deal. It is an economic deal which would allow the tariffs, which are currently at 10% for the UK, to be either reduced or perhaps even removed altogether. Now, discussions have been ongoing for many, many weeks, actually since before Trump became president. There was always an expectation that he would, because he said he would, put tariffs on many different countries. And so Britain and so many other countries as well were trying to put together a package that they could effectively offer to the United States as part of an agreement which would improve trade or tariff-free trade between those two countries. Now, I think the UK certainly hoped that prior to Trump's Liberation Day, nearly 2 weeks ago now, they might be able to get exempted from any tariffs. It didn't happen because it was clear quite quickly that Trump wanted his moment, that he was always going to have this Liberation Day. He was going to slap on tariffs, which it has turned out are in large part a part of a negotiation. And then from those tariffs, whether they're set at much higher, now that's been delayed for or paused for 90 days, or set at the 10% that the UK got. Now is the time where the deals can be made. So, yeah, it's a good thing for the UK that J.D. Vance said in an interview overnight. What was it? He said, I think there's a good chance that, yes, we will come to a great agreement that is in the interests of both the UK and the United States. But the devil, as always, is in the detail. There will need to be concessions on both sides. The UK may well decide to lower trade barriers, for example, on cars. So American cars could be sold in greater numbers in the UK. That could have safety implications because they're seen to be less safe than European-made cars. There's also the issue of American food into the UK. Well, British farmers would have something to say about that. So there are balances to be drawn. But sources have told me in the past few days that we are in the foothills of a deal. But the foothills deals means that there is a mountain to climb, or at least a hill to climb yet, and Trump is unpredictable. So we're not there yet, but I think encouraging signals.
Mark Stone with the latest from Washington. Mark, thank you. To Sudan now, which has been at war for 2 years, during which time atrocities have mounted and, according to the Foreign Secretary, the world has looked away. David Lammy spoke to diplomats and aid officials at a summit in London, hoping to ease what the UN calls the world's worst humanitarian crisis. And he told them it's morally wrong to give up on Sudan, where at least 20,000 people have been killed and 25 million face extreme hunger and famine. So how has the catastrophe unfolded in Sudan over the past 2 years? Well, it began on the 15th of April, 2023, when a power struggle came to a violent head between the army and the powerful paramilitary group, the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. Talks on governing together fell apart. The civil war quickly spread beyond the capital, Khartoum. The RSF's gains were focused on the west, including the Darfur region, where some of the worst violence continues today. But the army's pushback has gathered pace, especially in the past few months, taking back towns and states held by the rebels. Well, last month, the army, or SAF, made inroads back into the capital, capturing Khartoum International Airport. Military Chief General Abdel Fattah Burhan returned for the first time since the war began. And this is how the map looks now. The Sudanese army in green, holding most of Khartoum and territory stretching towards the Red Sea in the east. Yellow, towards the west, is RSF territory, with other parts run by splinter groups. Our international correspondent John Sparks has more, and a warning. His report shows the moments before people are shot point blank.
It is a war of horrors that plumbs new depths. A battle for power entering its third terrifying year. Here, members of the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, record their assault on a place called Zamzam. Zamzam is a camp in western Sudan, a refuge that hosts hundreds of thousands displaced by war. But the RSF, who began to bombard it 4 days ago, have taken control. Brute force deployed in a brutal conflict with Sudan's armed forces. We see them intimidate camp residents as they search for the enemy. Who was sitting here? I swear to God, threatens one. And they shoot unarmed men at point-blank range. Speak the truth. Where did they go? Says the gunman. The UN says famine is present at Zamzam camp, but the violence is more than most can bear. Tens of thousands have packed their bags. Another scene from the world's worst humanitarian crisis. The British Foreign Secretary says something must be done about Sudan as he gathered world leaders at London's Lancaster House. Where is the liberal outrage?
It's morally wrong when we see so many civilians beheaded, infants as young as 1 subjected to sexual violence, more people facing famine than anywhere else in the world. We simply cannot look away.
The attacks at Zamzam and camps nearby have created a great exodus to the west. Tens of thousands now arriving here in Tawila, dehydrated and malnourished, hundreds requiring immediate hospitalization.
As I'm talking to you, we have around 25 to 30,000 people that came within 2 days. And most of them used to trek by footing or using donkeys and spending 2 to 3 days on the road without food, without water.
Sudan's civil war has resulted in the near total destruction of the nation. 1/3 of the population have been driven from their homes. Yet this conflict has been neglected or ignored in the West, despite on-the-ground reporting by this channel and others. The very future of Sudan now being called into question.
There can be no military solution in Sudan. Only an immediate, unconditional cessation of hostilities.
The objectives of the talks in London are decidedly modest: securing humanitarian supplies and secure routes to deliver it at the top of their list. The pathway to peace will be much harder to find. John Sparks, Sky News.
And I'm joined now by Barbara Lammy, the head of mission at the Sudanese embassy here in London. Sir, thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. So we saw this conference today in London. No representative from your government was invited, or indeed, obviously, either of the warring parties. What's your reaction to that, first of all?
Thank you very much for having me. And let me start by expressing my condolences to the family of the victims of the fresh massacre in Zamzam camps, Zamzam and Abu Shok camps of internally displaced persons. And as for your question, actually being excluded from attending this meeting, let us wonder what is the real motive, what is the real purpose of having this kind of gathering in the absence of the main stakeholder, if it is really meant to help further the peace in Sudan. So we are not very happy, of course, to be excluded from this meeting. And we don't think this approach will help. This false narrative of two warring parties is not very helpful. In fact, there is only one party fighting the Sudanese people. It is not a fight between the Sudanese armed forces and RSF. RSF is actually fighting the people, as we have seen now, or the past couple of days, when they invaded the camp of the internally displaced person who have, in the first place, have been expelled from their home 20 years ago by the Janjaweed, which is the RSF now.
If I could just, I mean, the Sudanese armed forces have also been accused of crimes of indiscriminate attacks on civilians, on summary executions. I think Amnesty International also accused them of attacking a civilian infrastructure. But going back to the meeting that was held today, one of the main focuses seems to be the appalling humanitarian crisis, and that is why we're hearing this £120 million in part given to it. What do you think is the purpose of trying to help the humanitarian crisis if the root of the conflict isn't resolved?
First of all, let me correct that the Sudanese armed forces do not commit any crime, systematic crime. In the war, you can't guarantee that what we call collateral damage or collateral casualties take place, but the Sudanese army is a national army, is a professional army, is representing the entire make-up of our people. So it can be engaged or involved in this kind of crime that we are seeing from RSF. For the humanitarian situation, yes, you are right. Let us address the actors, the external actors who are fueling the war. And some of them were actually inside the meeting room. Some of the actors who are behind this heinous attack on Zamzam and Abu Shok camp were in the meeting, actually. And they were having their say in how to achieve peace in Sudan. And that is actually ridiculous. You can't bring the people who are fueling the war to make peace.
I mean, you mentioned that you'd like to see the international community involved in one way or another. I mean, we are seeing a time when at least the international aid budgets almost everywhere is being reduced. Which players would you want to see involved? Do you think it should be the African Union that tries to find some kind of stability? Would you like to see more Western interest? And realistically, what do you think will happen?
What we expect from the international community to call out those external actors who are fueling the war, who are supplying the militia, the terrorist militia with sophisticated and heavy artillery to attack the camp of internally displaced people, to attack civilians The RSF is not fighting the armies, they are fighting the people. So until and unless the international community have the courage to call them out, these external actors, and to put aside the commercial interest, the business, the economic interest, to give the priority to save human life. Until that, any international organization can do anything.
Today marks the 2-year anniversary of the start of the war, and the Foreign Secretary said 2 years is far too long. The UK will not let Sudan be forgotten. Do you feel that Sudan has actually been forgotten over the past 2 years?
Actually, Sudan may be not forgotten, but the international community has adopted like a lenient position on the actor who's fueling the war. And let me say that this war could have ended early on the 11th of May, 2023, just less than a month since the war erupted. We have signed, the government of Sudan and RSF signed the declaration, and it provided for like a roadmap for reaching ceasefire. But due to the impression or the desire or the wish of some international actors that RSF was progressing militarily, they didn't put enough pressure to see this on the militia to implement what has the obligation under that declaration.
Barbara Serra, Head of Mission at the Sudanese Embassy here in London. We're going to have to leave it there for the moment. Thank you.
That's welcome.
Well, for our Africa correspondent, Yusrael Bagir, the war has been particularly personal. She's covered the conflict as family, including her parents, were trapped by it. She's been reflecting on covering a war in her homeland.
You never think war will come to you, to your hometown, to your neighborhood. Then it does. And all you can do is witness the tragedy and pray for it to end. But the reality is that it's always happening in someone's home, to someone's family and friends. This time, it was mine. This place is full of memories, not just for me, but for everyone I know. It is the most iconic marketplace in the capital, if not the country. And it used to just be bustling, full of life. You could get anything that you wanted here. You could get antiques, you could get silver, you could get leather. And now this is what it is. It's just barren. And the shops were clearly looted long before this became a battleground. And now the destruction is complete. When the war in the news is the war at home, every event feels personal. An intimate reminder for millions of people that the home of our memories, of our loved ones, of our friends, is slowly ceasing to exist.
And let's take you straight now to the White House, where President Donald Trump is speaking. Let's listen in.
You won 10 of 13 games, including 9 by double digits. You beat Air Force, you beat Army, and now this 170-pound trophy, that's what it is yours once again. And I have to tell you, you had some brilliant players. On offense, you were led by an incredible fullback, team co-captain, Daba Fofana. Where is Daba? Where are you? Come here, come on. Is he hard, Coach? Is he a hard guy to tackle? Could I tackle him running forward? You don't suggest it, right? You want to say something? Come on.
I'm just going to say we couldn't have done it without Brian Newberry here, my co-captain here, Colin Ramos, and just everyone buying into the mission. And I'm excited.
Just listening to President Trump there speaking at a Navy football presentation a little earlier on. The White House has hinted about some countries inching closer to U.S. Trade deals. We are, of course, listening out for that. We'll bring you more coming out of the White House if Trump says anything of relevance. You're watching The World with me, Barbara Serra. Still to come. Funds frozen and threats about tax exemptions. Donald Trump steps up his fight with one of America's most famous universities.
They are pushing forward, trying to get people to disperse.
What Prince Harry wanted to do was to eject me.
Is that your opinion?
It is. It is.
Since the Oval Office meeting, have they reached out to you?
Why don't you go back to your country?
You've gone viral.
Have ever had such a reaction?
It's just incredible.
Beth Rigby from Sky.
You said I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
There could be some more painful decisions to come.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Sophie.
The big announcement.
The battle for number 10.
The drone is above us.
It is a chaotic scene.
They've asked us to leave.
There is a clear Labour landslide.
The car is covered in.
Liberated but left in ruins.
A major incident has been declared.
That's when misinformation floods the zone.
It became clear the media weren't welcome.
These extraordinary images.
Must have taken years.
Who wants to talk about politics?
OK, stand by.
I wouldn't be asking it if I didn't think it was a relevant question.
The winner of the 2024 presidential election.
Quite extraordinary events.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's international affairs editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. Alex Crawford joining us now from Ukraine.
Their personal possessions are all scattered around the place.
Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, try and make sense of the big numbers for us.
Things can change incredibly quickly, and that's what they have done.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Let's go back back to the U.S. now, where the country's oldest, richest and most elite university is fighting back against Donald Trump's attempts to gain control over what happens on campus. Now, the Trump administration said it's freezing more than $2.2 billion in federal funds for Harvard, hours after the university rejected a list of demands from the White House to limit activism on campus. It may also lose tax exemptions.
The president made it clear to Harvard, follow federal law, no longer break Title VI, which was passed by Congress to ensure no student can be discriminated against on the basis of race, and you will receive federal funding. Unfortunately, Harvard has not taken the president or the administration's demands seriously. All the president is asking, don't break federal law, and then you can have your federal funding. I think the president is also begging a good question. More than $2 billion out the door to Harvard when they have a more than $50 billion endowment. Why are the American taxpayers subsidizing a university that has billions of dollars in the bank already? And we certainly should not be funding a place where such grave anti-Semitism exists.
Well, the Trump administration has been targeting activists on campus, with immigration and customs enforcement agents making a series of arrests. The latest came yesterday when a Palestinian man who led protests against the war in Gaza while studying at Columbia University was arrested at an immigration office where he expected to be interviewed about finalizing his U.S. citizenship. Lawyers for Mohsen Madawi say he's a legal resident who's held a green card since 2015. Well, I'm joined now by David Armitage, Professor of History at Harvard. Sir, thank you very much for joining us here on the program. So let's look at the demands that the White House made of Harvard. Some of them, they want them to be they accuse you of being more committed to activism than scholarship. They want Harvard to end all affirmative action and also to prevent admitting international students hostile to what they're calling American values without really explaining what they are. Briefly, I know that you're against all this. Explain to us why.
Well, this is a full frontal attack, not just on Harvard University, but on the freedom of universities to continue to teach and research under the absence of any kind of external political constraint. I'm very proud of my own university for taking a leadership role on this. We have the resources, institutional, financial, and otherwise, to fight this, and we feel very strongly that we're doing this on behalf not just of higher education even, but of civil society as a whole in the United States under these malicious, politically motivated attacks.
This comes against the backdrop or the standoff against some issues that we had seen during protests about the war on Gaza and accusations of anti-Semitism on campus. I'm just wondering whether you are opposed to all the points made by the White House or whether it's mainly the principle of the fact that the White House is trying to impose its views on an institution like Harvard.
Well, as our president said in the very forceful letter that he issued to the university community, and this was followed up by the lawyers' response to the Trump administration's list of charges against us, we have been, as a university, taking extremely seriously any evidence of any discrimination against students, particularly Jewish students on campus. The administration's letter entirely ignored those moves and threw at us a whole new range of charges which bear little, if any, relationship at all to the central question of anti-Semitism. It's very hard not to see anti-Semitism as a pretext for a larger assault on free inquiry as represented by universities, something that President Trump, the Vice President J.D. Vance, and many of their associates have been promoting for some time now. It seems for them anti-Semitism, although serious and something that must be fully expunged from any community, a university community or otherwise, is just a pretext to attack a set of institutions which they hold to be antipathetic to their political mission.
Some people who were appalled, some donors that weren't happy with what they saw happen at Harvard, withdrew their funding over the past year. And now this from the White House. Financially speaking, is this a stand that Harvard can afford to take?
I am not privy to all of what goes on behind the scenes financially here, but it's certainly very clear that the university has been preparing for this eventuality. We've had some major bond sales recently. I believe that's over $1 billion now, so we've been building up a war chest here. I imagine our administration has been in talks with other donors about the possibilities for further support here, and although our endowment is not in any sense a piggy bank that can be raided. 80% of it is tied down by various restrictions, and the operating budget of the university comes mostly from the payout from that endowment. I hope that there will be some flexibility on the part of the university authorities to allow us to fight this very important fight and to protect our students and our central mission of research and learning from the impact of these ill-intentioned attacks from the outside.
Speaking of students, what reaction has there been on campus among students and the faculty as well?
Everyone I've spoken to and everyone who's been interviewed has been fully behind the president's, our president's, university president's resistance to the Trump administration's demands. I've never seen such unanimity here on campus or such resolve. I'm genuinely proud to be here at this particular moment.
David Armitage, Professor of History at Harvard University. Sir, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
This is The World. Coming up next, we'll head to Zimbabwe, where President Mnangagwa is facing the biggest threat to his rule yet as a succession battle begins.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before?
Yes.
Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Welcome back to The World. We're going to look at Zimbabwe now, where rumblings have been growing against the president, Emmerson Mnangagwa. Now, there have been sporadic protests in recent weeks and months by those who accuse the president of mismanagement, corruption, and of trying to extend his rule. Observers say this has caused a split within the governing ZANU-PF party. Well, Emmerson Mnangagwa became president in 2017 following a coup against longtime leader Robert Mugabe. He won re-election in 2023 and is currently serving his second and final term, which expires in 2028. Well, I'm joined now from Harare by Blessing Vava, Director of Human Rights Group's Crisis in Zimbabwe Coalition. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program. You have been quoted as saying Zimbabweans are tired and need a messiah. What did you mean by that, and how do you put that in the context of what we're seeing happen in Zimbabwe?
Well, from the events that we are witnessing on the ground and knowing and studying the behavior of Zimbabweans, they are so desperate for a messiah. They are so desperate for a person who is going to save them from the dictatorship of President Emmerson Mnangagwa. As you know, that Robert Mugabe's 37 years in power had made Zimbabweans live in abject poverty, and people were so desperate for someone to come. And that's why you saw Zimbabweans supporting the coup of November 2017. Little did they know that they were supporting and endorsing a person who would be worse than what we witnessed during President Mugabe's 37 years in power.
Can I just pick you up on that? What do you think it is that makes him worse, as you're saying, than Mugabe?
Of course, if we look at the human rights record of this government, remember that barely a year after Mnangagwa took power, we saw Zimbabweans being shot by soldiers in cold blood just a day after the elections of 2018. And we have seen many Zimbabweans, many activists from the opposition, from the civic society being arrested. We've also seen the abuse of the constitution with draconian pieces of legislation being passed by Emmerson Mnangagwa. We've also seen the worst corruption in the history of our country, where millions of dollars are being pillaged from the state coffers and going to offshore accounts and supporting the luxurious lifestyles of political elites. We've also seen President Mnangagwa's family being involved in a lot of corrupt activities, literally taking over, the running of the government.
He has been in power since 2017, won a re-election in 2023. Now his mandate should last until 2028. We've seen some protests, not overwhelming ones. I mean, what do you think the next steps should be? And do you think that there is an appetite in the country to remove the president?
I must say that Zimbabweans from the length breadth of the country are tired of President Mnangagwa's rule. But you must also understand that the amount of fear that has been installed in the people, the brutality of those who dare to protest. As I'm speaking to you now, there are dozens of activists who are arrested on the 31st of March. And there are many, many activists who are still going to court for allegedly trying to protest or speaking out against the government. So from where I'm standing, if you look at what happened, especially on the 31st of March, where Zimbabweans opted, to stay at home, I think it was a clear demonstration that they are tired of the government, but of course, they were afraid of going into the streets for fear, of course, of what I've alluded earlier, the arrests, the beatings that is characterized peaceful protests in this country, where the state has responded to violence, with violence, in terms of trying to quell protests. But we must also realize and characterize the events that we saw on 31st of March and the developing situation in Zimbabwe, that it is a factionalism or a power struggle within the ruling party, where President Emerson Mnangagwa is embroiled in a succession battle with his deputy, Constantino Chiwenga, after ZANU-PF passed a resolution at their October People's Conference in Bulawayo, where resolution number 1 said that they are going to extend the term of office of the president and amend so that President Mnangagwa serve more than the required by our constitution. So we are seeing these squabbles or this infighting within the ruling party dominating our political landscape at the expense of sales delivery, at the expense of developing the country, and et cetera, et cetera.
Blessing, Vava. We're going to have to leave it there. Director of Human Rights Group's Crisis in Zimbabwe Coalition. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
The wife of a man said to be wrongly deported from the U.S. to El Salvador last month has called on the presidents of the two countries to stop playing games with her husband. Donald Trump's advisors say they have no basis for Kilmar Abrego Garcia's return, despite the U.S. Supreme Court calling on the administration to facilitate it. Our U.S. correspondent James Matthews joins me now. What else have we heard about this case, James?
Yeah, hi, Barbara. It's been feisty, I might say, from the judge inside this courtroom number 2 in Maryland, where for many people it is the centre of the Constitution of the United States and its future, because this is where the line is between respect for the rule of the law and a dismissal of it by President Donald Trump. It's all about, of course, Mr. Garcia. He has not been charged, never convicted of anything, but he was flown to this jail in El Salvador. These people, a couple of hundred of them, and his wife, who's here for this hearing today, they want him flown back. A judge has said that he should be back, a judge at this district court. That has been echoed and endorsed by the Supreme Court, who want his return facilitated. That word, the subject of some contention. I'll speak about that in a minute, Barbara. But let's hear from Jennifer Vasquez, the wife of Mr. Garcia, who arrived here around about 45 minutes ago.
As we continue through Holy Week, my heart aches for my husband, who should have been here leading our Easter prayers. Instead, I find myself pleading with the Trump administration and the Bukele administration to stop playing political games with the life of Kilmar. Our family is torn apart during this scary time, and our children miss their dad so much.
Now, what's happening is that every day this judge is calling on the government to turn up in this court and answer the question, what have you done to facilitate the return of Mr. Garcia? Today, I can tell you, the government lawyers, they said, well, we've given you a transcript of an exchange in the Oval Office yesterday. You'll remember that meeting between President Trump and the president of El Salvador, neither of whom were inclined to return Mr. Garcia. The judge didn't like that. She said, look, I've seen the transcript. That's not evidence as recognised by the court. The judge at some stage could issue a contempt order. She said she wouldn't do that today. That would up the ante considerably, but that is perhaps for another day. You can hear the singing behind me. Linda's here. Hi, Linda. You're one of many people turning up here today. Talk about this being a challenge to the Constitution and this being where the line is drawn. This case, what do you think about that?
Well, today it's Mr. Garcia. Tomorrow it could be me, for being a woman, for being here. You know, we have a voice today and we need to use it, because sitting on the couch at home and going, it's terrible what's happening, but not getting up and speaking out, walking, chanting, bringing our signs, whatever, to say we have a constitution We have a right at the moment, and somebody is trying to take it away. And I am not going to allow it. I'm not going to be silent. And I'm so proud of all those here that are speaking up and speaking out. That's what we need to do.
Okay, Linda, many thanks for joining us on Sky News here today outside this Maryland courtroom. You know, this case exposes a tension between the power of the president and the power of the courts. Donald Trump enacting much change, much of it subject to legal challenge. This very much a test case in all of that.
Absolutely. James Matthews with the latest from Greenbelt in Maryland. James, thank you. Now, still to come on The World, the influencer who was at the center of a storm. We'll hear from trans actress Dylan Mulvaney about that Bud Light ad and what she's up to now.
The Premier League running is live on NBC and streaming on Peacock, with a crucial fixture in the race for Europe. Saturday, the unrelenting drama heats up as both Aston Villa and Newcastle chase Champions League qualification. An opportunity neither want to squander. This is the Premier League running, live on NBC and Peacock.
The only way to Gaza for us right now is with the Israeli military. The IDF had brought us in to show us a tunnel network under a residential neighbourhood.
The length of time it must have to have created these tunnels must have taken years.
At the end of the day, it's war at the top. It's war down here.
I'm Alistair Bunkle, Sky's Middle East correspondent based here in Jerusalem. As we were filming, there was a gun battle in the next street.
This neighbourhood, the Israeli military say, was the stronghold of Hamas's Rafah brigade.
It was just after 6:30 a.m. when the first shots were fired.
I remember everything. It was a day that I don't think I'll ever be able to forget.
There's no moon, perfect conditions for smugglers and human traffickers trying to move fuel, weapons and people.
The valleys in between, they're some of the main smuggling routes.
After days of negotiation, a major smuggler here has agreed to meet us.
The families that we've spoken to of people who have died trying to cross into Europe, they say you're a murderer. Are you a murderer?
No.
Sky News, get the full story first. Begum was 15 when she left East London with 2 school friends to join Islamic State in Syria.
Do you feel that you have committed a crime to the extent that you should serve time in a British prison?
I mean, I feel like the only crime I committed was coming here.
If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. I can take the heat. The second thing that Harry Truman said, was in politics, if you want a friend, get a dog.
My children will love a dog.
In Tel Aviv, a constant streak of interceptions filled the night sky as waves of missiles came in.
It appears to be a very, very large and sustained attack on Israel.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first.
Have a quick word for Sky News.
Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
And now to the social media influencer at the center of what was described as one of the biggest boycotts in U.S. history. When trans actress Dylan Mulvaney was approached by American beer brand Bud Light, she saw it as an opportunity. But what followed was an intense backlash from the beer's traditional drinkers and beyond, costing Bud Light its #1 sales spot. Now, she's written about those experiences in a new memoir and is starring in a West End musical. I spoke to Dylan Mulvaney and began by asking her about what happened with Bud Light.
I am someone who's an eternal optimist, and I think no matter what happens to me, I always figure out how to kind of dust myself off and get up and do what I love, which today is performing in a musical. But I think for writing my book, I really wanted to make good of a really dark situation that was happening when I took a unexpected, beer brand ad. And I think that while that was such a dark period of time in my life, and I think a lot of trans people's lives, I really wanted to show that if you keep going, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm feeling happy and healthy in my life right now. So I think that's why it was so important for me to write that.
I mean, you call it a dark time. It was quite something. You had to hire security, you had threats, and you also said it wasn't just you felt it had an impact on the trans community. Tell us a little bit about how that felt.
Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, I am just like a musical theater gal. And so when I got thrust into the spotlight through social media, I didn't fully know what I was doing. And I was also extremely early on in my transition. And so I don't feel like I fully had the tools and resources to advocate for the community. I still don't think of myself as an activist. And so I think I needed to make sure to take a step back, not share as much as I was online, to make sure that I was protecting the community. And now I think trans people are the most important piece of my life and the people in my life that I go to for advice. And I really find it so frustrating that there's so many people talking about us, but not including us in the conversations about, our identities.
I mean, you just mentioned that you don't really see yourself as an activist and you were thrust into it. But in order to include more voices in the debate that have your lived experience, how do you see your role now? I mean, you may not want to be an activist, but in truth, you probably are one of the most high-profile trans people in the world.
Sure, thank you. I think that there's an extreme amount of responsibility, but I think now maybe my advocacy looks a little different than maybe other people. For me, it's performing in the West End, in a few weeks. And I think that storytelling is a really powerful tool to help change people's lives in their minds. And I'm hoping that through this show, We Aren't Kids Anymore, that me being on stage, living my authentic self, can be a way for audiences here in the UK to maybe see me just as a normal human being, just like them.
It's difficult times for the trans community in the United States as well. We are seeing policies from the Trump administration that many would see as anti-trans. Again, how do you see the situation right now, and what do you think your voice could be?
Well, I think that it's sad. It's a sad thing to see someone trying to take away the rights of humans that are just trying to live their lives. Again, we're not monsters. We're people that have woken up and stepped into our authentic selves. For me, that's a very camp, fun, feminine human being who also happens to be a woman. And I think what I'm now excited is to step into this next chapter of my life and realize that there are so many other trans people who should be speaking on those things. And I'm finding my way in right now, which is through theater.
The trans issue has become a bit of a wedge issue politically in the States, in other parts of the world as well. How do you think we got here? And a lot of people say that the conversation hasn't been inclusive of everyone, and a lot of voices have been silenced, especially on the gender-critical view. Again, what are your thoughts, and how do you think you could improve the conversation?
I think trans people have always been here, and it's not something that just happened. It's not something that's being pushed on us by any certain influence or influencer. And I really think that people need to maybe stay in their lane a little bit. I think it's a very frustrating time. But I also think that, right now in my life, it's for me to be here doing theater and singing and dancing, and that's what brings me joy.
So you're in London, and we're at the rehearsal studios.
It's my favorite city in the world.
Oh, good. We're happy to hear that. Because you have a West End musical coming up. We Aren't Kids Anymore. And actually, you started your career on Broadway. So how excited are you to be in London? And what are the differences between the West End and Broadway?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, everyone is constantly saying, "Are you happy?" And that feels like a very serious question. Because I'm like, well, usually if I ask someone if they're happy, it goes into, you know, a very deep intellectual conversation. But usually we'll be at the piano and are you happy? And that means that I've learned the notes or the lines. And, or people say, when like my music director will say, if she really wants it belted out, she'll be like, give us beans. And I don't really know what that is either. And so there's been a little bit of learning, but this has been such a dream because I did do a musical called The Book of Mormon back in America, and we toured all across the country and Mexico and Canada. But I think for me, this feels like a really beautiful, fresh start from getting to perform in my identity, getting to take on a role that feels so open and honest and I can relate to, and in a city that feels like there's so much culture and history that I just feel so lucky to be here.
So let me finish with that question. After you went through the dark times with the Bud Light ad, are you happy now?
I'm so happy. And I think what I've realized even just in these past few days of rehearsal is that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. It's not to be going to the White House to, question the president, and it's, not to have to feel like a voice of generation, but to be the voice of myself in a musical, and that feels like the best version of me.
Did you regret doing that, going to the White House?
I talk about it in the book, actually. I write about how I think that was maybe meant for someone else, that a different, trans community member. But I try to not have regrets. I'm just trying to move forward in my life.
And that is it from me and the World team. Stay with us if you can. Anna Botting is coming up next with Sky News at 10. Stay with us.